Yeah, my name's Dan. I'm a recovered drug addict. I want to just start reading, just a little reading from page 24, from sharing about step 1, which is powerless. So the fact is that most alcoholics or addicts, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defence against the first drink. The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. There is a complete failure of the kind of defence that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, "It won't burn me this time, so here's how." Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth, pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, "For God's sake, how did I ever get started again?" Only to have that thought supplanted by, "Well, I'll stop with the 6th drink, or what's the use anyhow?" When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up may die or go permanently insane. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop, but cannot. There is a solution.
Thanks, Dan.
So, step 1, we admitted we were powerless over cocaine and all other mind-altering substances, that our lives had become unmanageable. Now that to me is I admitted I was powerless over relapse. You know, my life became unmanageable because of relapse and because of the sprees and the stuff that came along with that. You know, back in the day, when I was younger, my life was all right. You know, my life was manageable. I was able to do stuff. You know, I went to school. I got into trouble, but I was doing stuff by choice. My life was pretty manageable. Talking about the powerlessness. You know, I'm sat here in a fellowship of Cocaine Anonymous because my life or my willpower was reduced to the point where I had no choice in using. I had no choice in drinking. For a long time, I started to drink and use drugs because I wanted to. You know, I enjoyed the effect it had on my body, and it was fun for a long time. And I didn't really get many consequences from using. I might have had a hangover in the morning. I might have been sick everywhere. I might have even got into trouble with the police and got arrested. But that was my experience as a result of going out, getting drunk, using drugs. But I was able to put it down again, and then I had a choice to go and do it again because I wanted to. And on through the years, as I got older. Things started, my using got heavier, specifically, like drug specific was cocaine. In later days it was crack, but I was finding myself using against my own will, to the point where I was using and not enjoying it. You know, I wasn't enjoying the effects. As soon as I do one, I was in psychosis and, sort of ruining other people's lives around me as well as my own, and I found my wife to be back then. I promised her that I'd stop using cocaine. At that point, I probably still had a choice, and I chose to still do it when I went out drinking, going out on the piss. But even then, it was like, it caused arguments, but I'd still be able to put it down through the week, and then pick it up on a weekend. So where I was talking about manageability, I was able to manage my life. I was able to get a good job as an apprentice, and I was able to progress through the company and get quite far up. I was able to buy a house. I was able to get a nice car. I was able to manage my relationship with my missus. When I started losing control over picking up drugs, that's when my life started to get a bit more unmanageable. I started not turning in for work. I'd start, I'd have days off. I'd come in late. I'd make excuses. I'd stop going to appointments. I'd have a party to go to with the family. I'd stop going to meals. Or I'd make excuses to leave those meals because I'd used in between, and for me that was pretty unmanageable to start with. It got to the point where I was using at work, and some people have heard my story already. I ended up getting drug tested at work, and I got sacked. And at that point there, it was like a firm resolution that I'm not going to do it again. My life is starting to get pretty shit. I'm starting to get in big debt with drug dealers. I'm starting to get in debt with credit cards, loans. So it was at a point where I could have turned round. If I was a normal user or a normal drinker, I would have been able to just say, right, that's it, which I did. And I got another job. My life started to look well again. I started feeling a little better. And I ended up relapsing again. I ended up started lying, going out of the house for a few days at a time, hiding from my missus. So it started another spree. I wasn't able to bring to my consciousness the pain, the suffering and humiliation of what happens when I pick up. And this was a reoccurring story time and time again. Before I got sacked, I when I was still working for that company, I had a 4 or 5 day spree, pretty heavy, and I got home and I was speaking to my wife. And the next thing I know, I was sat on the sofa with paramedics in the house, police, and I'd ended up having a seizure, and it was pretty bad. I was hospitalised, and a couple of days later, I was sort of signed off work for 4 weeks, and for the whole 4 weeks, I was flat out at home. I was fucking. It says in the book, I was banging on, it says it banging on the bar, I was banging on the wall thinking, how have I done this again? This thing was going to kill me. And again, if I was if I had normal thinking around drinking drugs, that would have been the end. I swore off, this ain't going to happen again. And it did. So yeah, powerless. Powerless to me means it's going to happen again. Without a defence against that first one, it's always going to happen. I'm going to go to, where's the Jaywalker? I'm going to read the Jaywalker story. This is another thing that springs out to me out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Page 42.
Hold on, let me put these down.
So Yeah, page 37, more about alcoholism. Our behaviour is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, he would label him as a foolish chap, having queer ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him, and he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he is hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he has decided to stop jaywalking for good, but in a few weeks he breaks both legs. On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work, his wife gets a divorce, and he is held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects, where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? You know, that right there is my story. You know what I mean? It's swearing off, it ain't going to happen again. I'm hospitalised. You know, my health is deteriorating rapidly. I've lost so much weight. I'm blowing cartilage out my nose on a daily basis. But then I forget all of that stuff and I'll go and do it again. And, you know, insane. And you know, it all came out with my missus and she used to say, well, why do you keep doing it again? And I couldn't answer her. I could not answer her. I did have no reason. And sometimes I'd justify going and doing it again because I'd be pissed off. I'd have a bad day at work or she'd had a go at me for something, you know. But even in that, even that excuse doesn't really justify going and do that again and nearly killing myself time and time again by my using, because my using isn't normal. I go and just do it to excess until my body says no more. But my head tells me just half a gram. That'll be all right, Dan. Just go and do half a gram. So yeah, powerless. It's going to happen again without a defence. March last year, I ended up in a treatment centre, and it was a 12-step treatment centre. And by this point, I'm using every day. You know, I might have the odd day that I think I've got this. My illusion of power rebuilds itself. Most of the time, it was the fact that the dealer didn't have any gear or didn't have any money. I didn't have the opportunity to go and pick up, but my head tells me that's me controlling it. So I ended up in the treatment centre, and I was there for 30 days. I started feeling better. I started to understand what I suffered with, that I can't go and use, which before then I knew that I couldn't go and use. So the 30 days comes along and I'm let out and I'm back in my marital home, and I'm happy. My missus is happy that she's got me back and everything's going to be all right. And then the next day I pick up an 8 for gear and out of nowhere I'm back to square one. I'm back doing it again. Completely baffled, you know, completely powerless. You know, I had no choice in that. It didn't really cross my mind what was going to happen. I was there again. Couldn't explain it. You know, my missus comes home, what the fuck's going on? You know, and I swear off again. I promise her, and I really meant it. It's gonna be different this time. I know something about what I suffer with. Self-knowledge, it doesn't help when you're powerless. So at this point now, then I'm in the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous. I'm going to meetings, and I'm getting about 30 days at a time. 35, 40 days. The illusion of power is restored in me that I can prevent a relapse, and then I'm off again. Time and time again. That I suffer with a hopeless condition of state, body and mind. The problem centers in my mind. No matter where I go, no matter what I do, the strategies I use to stop fails me every time. I'd block numbers. I'd delete. I'd change my number. I'd give my family my bank cards. I'd try and go to the gym to keep my mind busy. But the time will come when I twist, and I think it's all right to go and do it again, forgetting what's going to happen, the consequences, and just how it's going to make me feel as soon as I pick up. As soon as I do that first one, back in psychosis. So I met a guy who's now my sponsor, and he related, and he smashed home the hopelessness of what I suffer with. He related his story to mine. He showed me the book. I read more about alcoholism, chapter 3, and the stories in that sprung out to me. I related to every single bit in there, and it was like the book was written about me, as it is for many other people who suffer with alcoholism. So I started going through the steps, and I thought I had a spiritual awakening as a result of going through all the 12 steps. I admitted I was powerless over relapse. I admitted that so many times. I knew I was powerless. I knew I had no control. That was pretty easy. I said those words. I went through the steps vigorously and honestly. And I went out to go and help others, and I was sitting in meetings just like this, and I was trying to find people that I could work with to take them through the steps, and all was well for about 70 odd days, and then I twist and I go and use again. My life had rebuilt itself again. I thought I was doing all right, and when I think I'm doing all right, I'm in very dangerous territory, as it was proven. So, it was Christmas last year. I had the best Christmas ever. I was actually present. I was with the family, and I was just enjoying life. And then Boxing Day came along, out of nowhere. I picked up, and I'm stood there on my own, sniffing cocaine, washing gear up on my own. In complete psychosis, thinking, how the fuck did this happen again? And at that point there, I had a moment of clarity, really. The illusion of power that I could prevent a relapse was completely smashed out of me, and from the information that I was put in front of me, and my own experiences of what happens, I was cornered, and I fully conceded. It was like the step before step one. I fully conceded that I was completely powerless, and there was nothing I could do to prevent a relapse. So I'd already gone through the steps, and that doesn't have to be everyone's experience. Some people come in and they don't relapse. For me, it was like, I was still hanging on to my old ideas that someday it's going to be different. And in that moment, I had an awakening. I'd believed in God, and this deal is all about God. Because my experience won't help yours, but my experience says that I have no willpower. There's nothing I can do to control this. I'd seen other people's stories where they'd trusted in God and they'd recovered. My God isn't a religious one, but I don't think too much about that. I've held my hands up. I surrender on a daily basis, and I live in a spiritual way of life. there's maintenance I do every day, but the most important thing I do now and my usefulness is for others. You know, I go and help other relapsing drug addicts and alcoholics, and yeah, by doing so, as a result of that, as a byproduct, I haven't relapsed for a little while, and all I can say is that's a miracle. So yeah, if anyone's new, get yourself a big book, find yourself a sponsor who works from the big book, and you know, just be willing to change your old ideas. There is a solution in the room, so I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan.